Hello, I'm Paul Orselli, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Thomas Sullivan. Hey, Thomas, how are you?
Fantastic, Paul. How are you?
Also fantastic. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. I just know it. And so, Thomas, what's just one thing about exhibits you'd like to share with people?
I tell you what, Paul, I think I'm going to do that thing that politicians do when they're asked a question in a debate and they take forever to actually answer the question. First, they thank
You,
everybody.
you weasel, don't do that.
No, no, no. Well, I will say this. In preparation for this conversation, I went back and watched some of the other Just One Thing videos, and I feel exactly the same as several of the other guests about trying to narrow down one thing. It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's sort of a sneaky question, isn't it? You think, oh, I can talk about just one thing, but then when you have to actually talk about that just one thing, but I'm sure you're up to the task. So pray, proceed.
Well, I tell you what, for me, I think a lot of this is flavored by where I am as of right now. I'm one tomorrow is my 6 month anniversary as a brand new executive director. So that, like a lot of my world is very much flavored by this, still sort of reeling from this major change in my career. I came from museum education, so have and as well as classroom education. So being that teacher world for so long, and now really leaning into the leadership world. And I think everybody, when they go through a big change, whether it's a person or an institution or anything, you think about the origins, right? You go way back to like what started all of this. Where did this all come from, I guess. And
Okay.
for me, I think my undergraduate's in musical theater. So I don't know if my theatricality comes through, but it for me it really
Oh, we
informed.
might get a song. We might get a song before this is all over.
Hear the music now. I will say I've made the joke more than once how valuable it is to both be able to figuratively and literally tap dance. That's that's valuable. But or maybe it's just me trying to find justification and still paying off my musical theater undergraduate. Could be all of those things. But I think so. In thinking about that theatricality, I find I don't know whether it's just for my own musings and or there is actual real value in seeking those juxtapositions, the similarities, the commonalities between parts within your world. So I think a lot about my theater days. I started theater as a very young child and went all the way through and like I said through undergraduate. And during that time in theater, I found so many wonderful pieces of it that I can see reflected in my world, in the museum world, of that connecting to the audience, being wanting to share a story, create a world. There are so many really, I mean, the word play, for example, I mean, like you put on a play and you play. I mean, as a children's museum person, that's a word we talk about a lot, finding that the really supporting the intellectual value and academic understanding of play and putting on a play. There's so many connections there for sure. I think with me especially, I also think there's the other side of it too, right? You think about the things that could be better. You think about how to advance these things, and I definitely saw that in the theater world. That was part of why I wanted to broaden my horizons and look into other places, and why I went into the museum world. There was often that time within the theater world I felt there were these feelings of being disingenuous isn't necessarily the right word, but you're using other people's words from long telling stories that have been told over and over again, and you find yourself wondering, who is this exactly for? Like what who is the audience for this? What's the point of sharing this? And I think I've run into all of those same inspirational sides of trying to create these spaces and these connections with the museum audience, and also wondering what's this exhibition for? What is this rule for? What are these policies that we're putting in place in our in the organization? Who's all this for? Where's the connection? So I think, for me, that's been my big connection piece as I sit here in this new role, trying to find these juxtapositions. So for me, I think with any exhibit, I think at this point, especially thinking about some of the folks that you've already interviewed, hearing some of the amazing folks like Amparo Lehman Pino, and those pieces about trusting children, and even mentioning one of my favorite exhibits from my old stomping grounds at DuPage Children's Museum, and the construction house exhibit, and hearing all of the wonderful conversations about equity and listening. And I love Ashanti's the amazing, what was it? I wrote it down. Moving at the speed of trust. My favorite. I'm using that forever now. That's my favorite thing. And then thinking about the really valuable project management pieces that have been talked about on this show. Thinking with Christian Greer's definition of done. I love those pieces, and the incomparable Clifford Wagner. I mean, come on, these folks. First of all, thanks again. Feeling so like veritable who's who of museum people. I feel honored to be included. But I think, for me, when I think about the just one thing, mine mostly comes from I feel very comfortable saying I don't feel like any sort of expert, but just, continuing to be a learner like anybody else. And I think that maybe that's part and parcel with being a children's museum person, that I feel maybe out of all the different branches of the museum industry, the children's museum crew has always spoke to me in the way that we're always up for adjusting and changing and shifting, and that well, maybe in the best of times. But I think when I'm looking at an exhibit or trying to create a new space, it's that for me, it's that constant, with the relentless pursuit of those connections and understanding the constant evolution of those connections based on who you are as an organization, who your visitors are as an organization, knowing that it's never finished, it's never complete, it's a constant dialogue. I think that's one of the things that I like about the theatricality of exhibits.
So, you mentioned a lot of good stuff there, but I just want to throw something out at you, because you mentioned audience and yourself as a learner. So, talk to me a little bit. I mean, it's interesting when you just said, of course we want to, you as a director are in charge of things ostensibly, but you also as an educator and as somebody with a theatrical background also want to put yourself in the spot of the audience and to be a learner. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that dichotomy, how to be both a leader and a learner, how to be both on stage and in the audience.
I think, it's clear when at least it has been for me, when I've seen it in both sides, right? You can see when you go to see a show, and it doesn't connect, it's not authentic, or it's again, it's asking, who was this for? Who was this? Who did why? Where was the reasoning behind this? Was it, purely for entertainment purposes, which, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. That can certainly be one layer of it, but you're wondering, like, where does Spider-Man the musical fit? The same way as, like, where does Transformers the interactive children's museum exhibit, where do these things fit in the broader sense of your connection to your audience? And then there's the whole other side where you can see the really deep thought and deep, lengthy connection and time that was spent to understand an audience and connect with them. So I think, that when I think about being that learner, I'm thinking about, every different side of it. And I guess, that there's a similar goal in mind between, entering a theatrical performance and sitting for a show, and entering a museum. You're there to contribute and commune with something, with ideally broader ideals that all of us humans are thinking about and wrestling with and contemplating, either whether it's for that joy of discovery or just pure joy in general, just being able to experience that, especially in a children's museum, like that, just joy in play. And same as in a happy, fun tap dancing musical. There's not necessarily much deeper than that, but that joy and entertainment is valuable in and of itself. And then there are those times that you can dive a lot deeper into a content topic. I think a lot about the work that Children's Museum of Pittsburgh does, and so many of the way, just their approach to so many of the exhibitions that they design, not only for themselves but for their traveling menu. There's so
Tough, tough art. I love their tough art program.
Yeah, totally. And things like XOXO, these just, and even some very, like fun, broader content ones, like their measurement exhibit. I should say I'm a Pittsburgh native, so I grew up going to Pittsburgh Children's Museum. I still call it my children's museum. I don't, they they would probably look at me strange. It's not my children's, but and I feel very strongly that I hope the children that visit our space at Westchester Children's, they feel that same way. They walk out, they feel that ownership of the space. And I think that's a good connection to how you should feel about any type of these, cultural learning experiences. You should feel like they're yours. That show that you love so much that, we all listen to Hamilton on repeat over and over until we were trying to get the words correct. You take ownership of it. It becomes a part of you. And I think that is a mark of a well-designed anything within this cultural learning world. And I think that's an important thing to think about too, is that, when I think about this a lot, having been a classroom teacher myself for so many years, I started as a preschool teacher. And because like all good musical theater kids after undergraduate, I came to New York City and started auditioning, but very quickly understood it's going to be a difficult.
I need to eat.
Yes, that would be helpful. So I had worked as in the university preschool during my work study in musical theater school. So coming to New York, I immediately found a job in a preschool in the West Village, and spent a wonderful 5 years there designing curriculum. And because it was the West Village, there was a little extra. It wasn't your normal preschool; it had a little bit more going on to it. So I was the science specialist. So I got to create all of these, it was very much informal learning before I really actually knew what that was. And then, having, spending 5 years there, wanting to grow the audience, having that urge to share more, maybe is that theatricality again, wanting to broaden the audience. And I found museum education, and there was that wonderful click for me of like, oh, this is another way to engage. Because you think about, when you ask most humans, where do you go to learn something? I don't know the percentage, but I'm fairly sure a high percentage would say school. School would be it's our automatic where you go to learn things. But then there's all these peripheral other spaces. And I think, I often think about what we, as an alternate space, as an other space that what are the things that we're trying to achieve? Is it do things better than schools? Is it do things schools can't? Is it do things that are bigger than that, or in some cases smaller than that, or both? I think it's that constant, like I said, that constant pursuit of the question of the connection, of figuring out where we sit, is part of the beauty of spaces like ours.
Well, I think I'm going to take away from this conversation a new way of thinking about the phrase "the play's the thing," because you made me think about the word play as play, things we do, but also play like things we're involved in and we come to see. So I think I'm gonna think some more about the connection between the play, the theater, the museum, based on this conversation. So thanks, Thomas. I think you may have gotten more words per minute in than any other participant so far. But that's also part of the gig. So thanks very much.
Too much of a monologue there, I guess.
No, it's good. All right. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, Paul. A pleasure as always.
Take care.